Welcome to Philosophy15. I'm Robert Talese.
I'm Scott Aiken.
These are 15-minute unscripted conversations. We are the authors of a couple of books, including Political Argument in a Polarized Age and Why We Argue and How We Should. This is a second episode devoted to the trouble with the philosopher.
The philosopher.
With Aristotle. So last time, Scott, we ended on the point that Aristotelian essentialism is anti-Platonic.
In one sense.
In the sense that the essences are not disembodied from their instantiation.
Right.
They are intrinsically instantiated.
Right.
But they're nonetheless immutable. That what it is to be a heart or what it is to be an eye is unchanging.
So one of the things that we had left out in the previous discussion was that we were talking about, so let's start with the physics in terms of just talking about the ousia, the essences, the what it isness of things. And we, in the previous one, we really talked about the relation between the three sort of standard material causes, efficient, formal, and material causes. And those were ones that we were kind of messing with. But there's a fourth cause that we left out that in some ways is, in some ways, at least from a modern perspective, and certainly from the perspective of the issue with essences, is one that also needs some addressing. And in fact, it's supposed to be it's final cause, teleological causation, purposive causation. And this is how we get the puzzle with hearts.
Right.
This is how we get the puzzle with really pretty much all of the things that, in some ways, I once saw somebody outside of Furman Hall here struggling with an umbrella to get it open, and it was broken. And the person looked at me and said, "It's almost as though it's not an umbrella." And that's kind of what we're talking about right now.
You had
right?
the Aristotelian thought.
If you have
no almost about it.
Right, that's exactly it. An umbrella that lets rain through or doesn't open to create the canopy for you is not an umbrella.
Full stop.
Full stop.
Right.
Right. So that's the reason why.
But here's the question. Right? So the corpse's eye is an eye only in the way that the statue's eye is an eye, according to Aristotle, and that's now just again appealing to the final cause. But despite the fact these are supposed to be standalone clauses, it really is hard to say much about any particular clause without talking about others.
Ones.
So we're talking about the final cause now. Why the telos of the eye is seeing.
Yes.
A corpse's eye is not seeing, and in the relevant sense of potential is not a potential.
Not even potentially doing
seeing.
so.
Yeah. So it's not like the guy with his eyes closed, eyes are not seeing. And so the question just is, okay, so it's not an eye, given that we define things in terms of their function. So what is it?
It's an X-eye?
Well, this is where...
It's a non-eye? Right. So, I mean, so one of the things that we have to use to at the very least address the things as they are is to talk about what their real potentiality is versus, you might say, mere potentiality, or you might say potentiality in words. And this is the difference between the eye of a corpse or the eye of a statue versus the eye of someone who is sleeping or...
right, so that's sort of first and second potentiality from deonema, right?
That's right. So you can have eyes that are not seeing, things that pass for eyes that are not seeing, and you have eyes that are not seeing. It's just that with some of them, it only requires that you change something about them and something around them, so the opening the eye or waking somebody up is something that's not the kind of change that would involve taking the eye out of, or the thing that passes for an eye out of a corpse and putting it into somebody else's body and then seeing with it. Right, so in some ways, Aristotle would have a hard time explaining what exactly we're doing when we've got the bag of ice with organs in them.
Are they organs?
Are they organs? Yeah, that's right.
I mean, a corpse isn't an organism.
No, right. Right. So this is, and so notice, by the way, that some of these arguments are ones that come from the way we talk. right? So these are in some ways not, you might say, external arguments against Aristotle. These are internal to the program, which is Aristotle says he's going to save common sense. It still seems that we still say commonsensically that whenever we've got someone in the midst of an organ transplant, that we have an eye in that bag of ice.
Yeah. Or a kidney.
Or a kidney.
Whatever.
Whatever that is.
And that we can say of, not to get gruesome, we could say of a corpse, right?
Yeah.
That its eyes are intact. The eyes are intact, for example.
Right.
And some of and the organs are intact. The heart is the corpse has a heart. The Aristotelian view, that's strictly speaking false.
Right. Now I wonder if Aristotle would have the Aristotelians have the resources to nevertheless say there are ways that we can talk about things that have got certain kinds of causal histories. So it is materially an eye, right, in the sense in which it's got all the same things, right, and it has the same form, namely that if light were to go through it, it were to put the light in a certain kind of position with regards to, and so it's got all of the same formal and material, and it's made of the same stuff as an eye. I would think that the Aristotelian would say, that's enough for me to say something like, it's an eye in a deficient sense.
Yeah.
Right? And that's one way that we would even say something like, look, that we would even say that of the eye of a statue, that it has the status of a deficient sense, but a real eye. So I think that again, it's less a strategy of fully endorsing that vocabulary. I think that the Aristotelian would have to find a way to kind of massage it and say, that's a way that you talk, but if we were actually speaking precisely.
Yeah. But this is where I think the drive for the save the appearances, common sense stuff, and the deep metaphysical longings kind of pull apart. Because look, how counterfactual can we get? So now I take it that the kind of examples we were just using, where we've got an igloo cooler with ice in it and a kidney on its way to a hospital, we'd want to say, well, that's a kidney. That's not just that's not a heap that right. Once it's connected in the right way into a patient's body, presto, becomes a kidney. Right? That's a kidney as it's being transported. But that's because we have the technological abilities to do these sorts of things. So, how counterfactual are we going to be with this? Can the camera by which we're now being recorded, under certain kinds of not too distant technological developments, could serve as somebody's eye?
We even call it the eye of a camera now, right? That's right. And that's more a metaphorical sense now. Right.
But with some pretty minor, not too distant technological, that is like the kidney in the igloo cooler filled. So is that in some sense of a potential eye too?
It certainly has the material and the formal features that would make it, or at the very least, potentially so. Now, I think that one of the insights that we're kind of running with is now shifting more to an external criticism of Aristotle as opposed to an internal one.
Right.
And the external criticism of Aristotle is that one way that, at least in the post-Darwinian naturalist program zeitgeist that we live within, the way that we conceive of function is in terms of the material and efficient histories of the things and what material and efficient possibilities there are for them. And so what we think of as the function of a kidney is in terms of the function that it performs in that individual organism, and then the long evolutionary history of the things that counted for and against having kidneys and not having kidneys. And so those are efficient and material causal histories that then provide, right, that telos, that purpose. And I think that, once we're kind of within that Darwinian zeitgeist, that view that teleological causation or teleological explanation being sui generic from the other ones looks like nonsense.
I think that that's right. And let's not overlook that when we are talking about teleological explanation in Aristotle, it's always normatively intoned. It's not just what the eye does. Right. It's what the eye does when it's functioning properly.
Good.
When it's doing its proper job, right? Yeah. And so one might say, we both wear eyeglasses. Do we not have eyes?
Yeah. In a deficient sense, yes.
So, again, this is just I would just say, marvelous, and by to be marveled at, right? Attempt to save, to take in, to observe, to categorize, to organize the appearances. Then there's the felt need to underwrite all of that with something that I think ultimately undoes it, right?
This is you had a line that was kind of hanging earlier, this deep metaphysical longing, and you're connecting it to this, to the, like, it's not just teleology with a small t, it's big T, despite the fact that I hate that typological distinction.
Yeah, right.
But there is something to it, which is that it looks like there's a kind of theological kind of program hanging in the background here.
That might itself be just straight up Platonist.
That is a deep insight.
Because things are not defined things are defined in terms of their function, but their function is always understood as proper or good functioning. And so isn't everything ultimately to be understood as it's good?
Yeah. I think that is the internal Aristotelian answer.
Good. Now, how is that not Platonist?
Well, it's certainly got the idealist. It's got the mark of idealism on it, which is that the good is the deep explainer of all. That, and by the way, is the argument of that's the
first paragraph of the Nicomachean Ethics.
That's exactly it. It's the first paragraph of the Nicomachean Ethics. It's the argument for the uncaused causer in the physics and the metaphysics, which is the deep explanation for why things keep running is the good. And so the deepest explanation for even what kind of keeps material and efficient causation going is the good. And I think that you're right. I think that is a deep kind of Platonist kind of thought, which is that it's the good that sustains these sorts of things. It's the divine, at least with Aristotle. He doesn't call it the good or the form of the good, but it is the good because it is the teleological explanation.
Yeah, and he might not say it's the good as a singular.
He thinks there are 47
at the top of the divided line.
There are at least 47 of them in the metaphysics.
Yeah, but how far away is it from just saying, okay, it's just put an ampersand in between them.
Right.
That's the thing.
That's the thing.
And that does strike me as kind of Platonist, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds correct to me. That Aristotle preserves that Platonic program precisely because he thinks that, again, I just keep coming back to this. The four causes are all supposed to be sui generic, right. And once you think that teleological causation is not reducible to the other ones, neither is formal. That you're gonna have maybe not Platonic but Platonish. There's gonna be something Plato-ish in what you're doing,
and that's the trouble with Aristotle.
Well, yeah, I mean that is a hangover from Plato. Is that the?
Well, no. Let me put it this way: that despite all of the bravado about the predecessors, our friends in the academy, we have to value truth over more than even them. Well, despite all of the triumphalism. That Aristotle, despite all of the PR that Aristotle,
that's right,
despite all of the press that Aristotle gives you about himself, it ultimately is more of the same, right? I mean,
well, I mean, in some ways, that's supposed to be one of Aristotle's virtues and vices, that he is a triumphalist, But his triumphalism really is a kind of a do your best to synthesize the greatest hits. And the things that don't fit in, identify them as errors. Because in fact, whenever he speaks of teleological causation, he doesn't invoke Plato. He says, "Do you know who's got the you know who from my predecessors are the ones with the real insight with teleological causation? Hesiod."
All right, that's a thought too big to pursue at this time. Philosophy 15, folks. Thanks for listening. That was the Trouble with Aristotle. Part 2.